Hi there. Okay, so today we're going to do something a little different than what you might have thought. Last week we looked at two chapters, chapter 6 and 7 of the book of Esther. And I was planning to do chapter 7 and 8 this week and 9 and 10 the last week. But the truth is, as I'm reading this again, come to realize that for two reasons, I want to do the rest of Esther all today. First of all, the book of Esther, chapters 1 through 4, we get to know the people, we get to know the situations. In chapter 5 and 6, we kind of get to the first pinnacle and start down. At the end of 4, we're at the top of the pinnacle, and then we start going, dipping down, kind of like, okay, things are a little bit better. And then at the end of chapter 6, we're at the top, the pinnacle of the story of Esther, the book of Esther. And then there's another little dip, another small peak, and then it's resolved, a resolution. Now, for two reasons, I want to do chapters 7 through 10, the last 4 chapters, all today. Chapter 10 is all of 3 verses, so that was kind of like, that was definitely going to go in with something else. But chapter 9 really is a recap, basically what we're expecting to happen from what is said in chapter 8. And so what I'm planning to do is we're going to go through chapter 7 and 8. I will recap, let you know a little bit of the outcome that happens in chapter 9. We'll read a little bit from chapter 9, and then just so that we know the very end of the story, we will read chapter 10, all 3 verses. So we're just going to take it like this. The second reason why I decided to do the 4 chapters all at once, and I'm sitting on the edge of the chair, so I'm going to bring it in a little. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the second reason is, if you're watching this during the week, the Sunday or the week that it gets put up on YouTube and Facebook, you will know that this coming Sunday, this next Sunday, is the first Sunday of Advent. The first of the 4 Sundays of Advent. If you don't know what Advent is about, then you need to check it out starting next week, because what I want to do is do the 4 Sundays of Advent on an Advent/Christmas theme. So I want to finish, and I think we really can finish Esther easily today. Okay, so to bring us up to it, like I say, chapters 1 through 4, we meet all the characters, we meet the situation, the dire situation at the end of chapter 4. Chapters 5 and 6, it's pushed to the forefront, and Esther, who faces death, takes courage, goes to the king without having been called, and she takes her life into her own hands, basically, or putting her life in his hands, because as king, he can choose whether she dies or not. But then there's a little lull. She invites them to dinner. Then there's a little lull. Mordecai gets recognized for, Haman gets really, really angry and decides that he's going to kill Mordecai the next day. And that next day, the king kind of sideswipes him with, oh, by the way, Mordecai needs to be honored for having saved my life. And so we get to the end of chapter 6, and it's time for Haman to go to the second banquet with the king and queen, where he should be feeling great honor and elation, but they almost have to force him to go to the banquet because he is so down from having to honor Mordecai rather than kill him that day. So this is that same day. And the funny thing is, I kind of looked at the book again, and because time is really mentioned often in this book. We know it starts off in the 3rd year of King Xerxes' reign, and we know that Esther is made queen. Sorry, every time I start this, my nose starts tickling. I'm sorry. Maybe the talking. Okay, so we know that she is chosen to be queen in the 10th month of his 7th year as king. And then we know that in the 12th year, in the 1st month, is when this decree is created to kill all the Jews, on the 13th day of that 1st month of his 12th year. And then things kind of like, they don't tell us the timing right away, but we know that Mordecai goes into mourning. Esther finally agrees to go before the king, and they do 3 days of fasting and all that. And on the 3rd day, she presents herself. Okay, and then all of this is going on. She presents herself that night. She has a banquet, and she invites them to the next day. So it's just another 24 hours later, and they're meeting for this 2nd banquet. So this is the timing, and we will get to know when this was actually happening in a little in this reading today. Okay, so we know it's 4 days after she started fasting, but that's all we know. We don't know when she started fasting, but we will find out today. So let's look in the book of Esther, chapter 7, and we're going to read verses 1 through 4 to begin with. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther, and as they were drinking wine on that 2nd day, the king again asked Queen Esther, "What is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted." Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king." Let me stop there for a sec. Okay, so she is bringing this up. She's like, what I'm asking for, my plea is for my life, and my request is for my people, that we not be killed. If we had only been sold into slavery, I wouldn't have bothered you with this. But because it's death, it's like, I don't want to be bothering you, but because it's actual death, I am bringing this to you. I mean, it's like the king again is saying, "Hey, whatever you want up to half my kingdom, whatever you want, I'll give it to you." And she spells it out. But at this point, no one knows what's going on except for her. So now we continue with verses 5 to 10, which is the rest of that chapter. It's a short chapter. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing?" And Esther said, "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. And just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the words left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows. Remember, it's a spike. He was impaled. That he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. Okay, so it's like, what? Explosion. It's like, who dares do that? Kill you? Who dares try and do that? Haman. And I find it funny that they have to mention that the king left his wine and went out into the palace garden. I'm here like, he is such a lush. It's like every time we see him, he's drinking. But apparently he's so angry or distraught that he leaves his wine and goes out into the garden. And the fact that he's this angry, it's like Haman knows, yeah, I'm a goner. He is so angry. The only one who can save me now could maybe be if the queen speaks up for me. But then, of course, no man touches any of the women in the harem, especially the queen, and especially right in front of the king. He just did everything wrong and was immediately, and I love how this eunuch just comes up and says, "Oh, by the way, he was planning to kill Mordecai, the one who saved you, and he's built this 75-foot gallows or impaling stalk thing by his house to do that." And of course, Haman gets killed by that immediately. They just immediately take him and do it. It's not something, no court of law. No, the king is angry with him. He is gone. So that's the end of chapter 7, which is why I told you we definitely can do more than just one chapter a day. And now we're going to continue into chapter 8, and we're going to read verses 1 through 6 to begin with. That same day. Okay, so we're still in that same day. King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "if he regards me with favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" Okay, there's several things that I want to point out here. First of all, the king, oh, I need a fan. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah. I'm in the dining room. The dining room doesn't have a ceiling fan because it's a dining room. Okay. Okay, so he immediately gives all of Haman's property to Esther, which is going to be a lot because Haman was second in control of the entire empire, plus very full of himself. So he would have tried to get as much as he could out of this situation he was in. So you know his estate is quite extensive. Now, of course, she lives in the harem, so she can't be running a huge estate across who knows how many provinces. So she offers the job to Mordecai. And, he's going to oversee Haman's estates. But in the meantime, the king, who has taken his signet ring back from Haman before Haman was killed, gives it to Mordecai, basically making him the second most important person in the kingdom now. And so all of this is happening. But then it's in verse 3, it says, Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. So she comes to him again. This is later. There's an unknown amount of time here, but this is later because she is safe and Mordecai is safe. But nothing's been done about the Jews. I mean, she and Mordecai are safe because they're in the palace, and the king won't allow anyone to kill them. No one would dare try and kill them because they are in the king's good graces. And the original edict said that you could kill any Jew and then take their property. Well, to get to Esther and Mordecai, they're going to have to go into the king's palace, and that ain't happening. So they're safe. But what about the Jews throughout the kingdom? 127 provinces, and not just in the city of Susa. Oh, now I got the hiccups. Anyway, so she comes and she begs again. Why do I say this is a separate time? Because if they were still having dinner, well, first of all, Mordecai wasn't there, but she introduces Mordecai later. But it says that in verse 4, the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she rose and stood before him. So we're back into a situation where she has not been called for, and she goes to him again in the throne room when she hasn't been called for. And he holds out the scepter a second time. So here, some time has passed, but it's still something that she needs to do, and she had the courage enough. She now is safe. Mordecai now is safe. She is now probably the richest woman in the kingdom. Mordecai is second in command. It's like, they're okay. She could have just left it there, but the Jews aren't safe yet, and so she takes her life into her own hands again. And I think that these verses 3 and 4 here are read quickly. You kind of go from, Haman's doing it, Haman's killed, and everything is all well. And it's like, no. There's actually more stuff in here. She actually confronts her fears again and presents herself to the king, having not been called by him. And she asks for him to help the Jews. So, verses 7 through 10, let's read here. King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have hanged him on the gallows. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and in the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language, Hebrew. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. Now, if a king's edict can't be the word was like, no document can be revoked, the first edict still stands, that on the 13th day of the 12th month, anyone can kill a Jew and take their property. That still stands. But now we have a new edict. And I haven't read what it actually says, but again, did you notice the timing? This is the 23rd day of the 3rd month. The first edict was written on the 13th day of the 1st month. So this is 2 months and 10 days later. So all of the time, all this story of Esther having, the edict going out, Mordecai being in sackcloth and ashes, telling Esther that she's got to do something, her getting up the courage and fasting and coming before the king and offering the 2 different banquets, pointing out Haman as the bad guy, her getting his estate, Mordecai getting this high rank. All of this is happening sometime in a 2-month, 10-day period. It's like, the first chapters are like 4.5 years later, 4.5 years later. It's like 3 days later. But now it's like, it's been 2 months and 10 days since the first edict was written. Now, what can this other edict say that will change the matters, for the Jews? Well, let's find out. Let's read verses 11 through 14. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The date appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses raced out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was also issued in the city of Susa. Okay, now what just happened here? This new edict says, you know what? You can fight back. You are allowed to kill them. See, before that, they might have been, they might have fought back, but killing would have been murder, and they would have been accused of murder because the edict didn't say they could fight back. And also, this one says not only can you fight back, but if you kill them, you can plunder their property. So it's like okay, it evens the score. Except of course we know God is on the Jews' side, and so the score is a little skewed because it's not just Jews fighting, it's Jews with God's backing fighting. Okay, so this is different. And that date, the 13th day of the 12th month, it's the same day. It's like they haven't said you can do it a day early or you can do a day after. No. It's if they come attacking you, they are your enemies. You can take them on. Okay, so it's like your enemies, you go after them. Okay, and the rest of this chapter continues with verses 15 through 17. Mordecai left the king's presence wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. It's like, I think it's like, the Jews are like, okay, we can do this. We actually have a chance of surviving. We will not be annihilated. Even if some are lost, it's not a death sentence to all Jews. And then also, that Mordecai is now the one in all this splendor, and he's a Jew. People who were afraid of Haman, and it's like, oh yeah, Haman. It's like now they're like Jews. Okay, so a lot of them are like, you know what? I think I'll become a Jew. It's like it might be safer to be, yeah. It's like apparently they are in the king's favor, so it is important to be, a Jew. So now this happens. Okay, now we come to chapter 9. And chapter 9 basically tells us what happens on the 13th day of the 12th month. The edict that was commanded was carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. And it goes on to tell us about in the city of Susa, the citadel of Susa, on that day, the Jews killed 500 men who had attacked them. They fought back. They won. They also killed the 10 sons of Haman who had tried to kill Mordecai and themselves. So they killed, so now there are no more descendants of the Amalekites. They're gone. The descendants of King Agag, they're gone. There are none left. Haman had 10 sons and they're gone. They're all killed. And then after they're killed, they're later impaled. And on, the same death, that their father had, except that they were already dead. Oh my goodness, my nose tickles every time I start talking. It's kind of like it reverberates in my sinuses. Anyway, okay, so something different happens in Susa than in the rest of the province. In the rest of the province, on the 13th day of the 12th month, the same thing is happening across the whole kingdom, the whole empire. All the Jews are fighting off and killing their enemies. No Jew dies, not from this, but all those who attack them do. In the city of Susa, Queen Esther asks the king if they can have another day, because at the end of the first day they had not finished killing those who had been attacking them. They hadn't gotten to all of them. And so those 500 plus the 10 sons of Haman weren't all of the ones who hated and wanted to kill them. And so the king allowed in Susa, in the citadel of Susa, in the city of Susa, he allowed them to have another day. And on the second day, they killed another 300. It's across the entire empire, they killed 75,000. And every time they talk about killing, they add the thing, and they did not lay their hands on the plunder. They did not get rich from the death of those who attacked them, opposed to what their attackers were hoping for, was to plunder their wares. The Jews killed the attackers, killed those who hated them, killed their enemies, but did not get rich by doing it. They did not take on any of the plunder. So, near the end of the middle of chapter 9, they start talking about how they celebrate it. The celebration of this victory, of winning and not being annihilated. And so I'm going to look at starting with verse 20, probably 20 to 22 in chapter 9. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually. Oh my goodness, I got to blow my nose. Anyway, annually, I lost my place. the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy, and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. Excuse me. That helps. Okay, so the 14th and 15th days of Adar, the 12th month of the year, that celebration goes on to this day. In fact, it is a fun celebration. It's a celebration. It's not a religious holiday. It's a celebration. It's a time. It's called Purim, 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 and it's a time where, especially in Israel, you'll have a lot of kids dressed up in costumes. Yes, a lot. You're going to have a lot of Queen Esthers, and Mordecai's. But you'll also have, a little Batman over there, and all kinds of costumes on Purim, because it's a day of celebration. It's a day to celebrate what happened here. Then it continues on, and I want to read the chapter 10. I mean, well, actually, okay. I will read verse 29 and 30 in chapter 9 first. So Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm this second letter concerning Purim, and Mordecai sent letters to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Xerxes, words of goodwill and assurance, to establish these days of Purim at their designated times. So Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther decreed these and established them, and their descendants in regard to themselves and their descendants in regard to their times of fasting and lamentation. So it's like, this is not a time of fasting, this is not a time of lamentation, this is a time of celebration and joy. Then chapter 10. King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores, and all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king had raised him, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and held in high esteem by his many fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. And that's the end of the book of Esther. There's a question. What happened to Esther and Mordecai? At this point, it's at the end of the 12th year of King Xerxes' reign, around that time. And what happened to them? We don't know for sure, but if King Xerxes is the king Ahasuerus of the Bible, and Esther was his queen, there is, historically, we know what happened to King Xerxes. He was deposed, killed, by someone backing his eldest son, who would have been the crown prince, would have been the son of Queen Vashti, not the son of Esther. He would have been the son of the first queen, Queen Vashti. And that was Artaxerxes. And Artaxerxes, with the help of other backing, probably anti-Jewish, backing, took over, killed King Xerxes. Now, if Esther is the queen and Mordecai is the second in command, they probably ended up the same way. A sad ending when you think about it, but it's what happens in these times. You take there's a coup, and they were killed. or was probably killed. King Xerxes was. And if they were that high in government, they would have been considered a liability, and they would have been had the same fate. What we do also know is that dear Artaxerxes, who did all this, did not reign for long. In fact, if I remember right, because I didn't reread it recently, I read it when I was first getting ready for Esther. If I remember it correctly, he only reigned for 3 months, and then someone else came in. So yeah, whatever happened to Esther and Mordecai. But the celebration is there. Purim is celebrated every year by Jews, by observant Jews. Haman, very often one of the funny things that they do about Haman is they write his name on the bottom of their shoe and they stamp on it and they step on it and they step on it. And every time anyone says the name Haman, or because they read the book of Esther for Purim, anytime Haman's name is mentioned, they either boo or spit or whatever. It's like, and stomp their feet. And there's actually hamantashen, which is a cookie, a triangular cookie that has the traditional is fig preserves or whatever in the middle. I prefer it with more of a strawberry type filling, but you can get them at the time of Purim, which is late February, March, maybe early April, depending on the year. So let's just say around March. Yeah. And it's a great time of celebration. So that's the story of Esther. That's the book of Esther. And we did it in less than 40 minutes. So next week, we're going to begin on the 4 Sundays of Advent. And I invite you to join me. And let's look at what God has to tell us about Jesus and his first coming and possibly his second coming. I'll see you then. God bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Bye.